morning. It's Josh Herrema here with another episode of Radiant Reflections. Here once again with my co-host, Pastor Ryan Bibb, who's drinking some coffee over there. Is it delicious?
It is. It's good. Rasika did a good job.
All right. They've mastered the art of whatever.
JB and Rasika tag teaming. Excellent cup of coffee.
Yeah. So, hey, we are here today for episode 23 with two pretty cool guests. We have with us Mr. Dave Northrop.
Morning.
And Mr. Ryan Banaszak.
Morning.
How you guys doing today?
Wonderful.
Is this the first podcast you guys have ever been on?
I think it's my first podcast. It is for me.
Now, have you guys done radio stuff with like Styles down at the station?
Yeah,
and stuff like
done quite a lot of that.
Okay, yeah. So you guys,
They're
pros.
Old hat. That's right.
Hey, for our listeners that may not have any idea who these guys are, can we have them explain who they are?
We are. That's one of the first things.
Oh,
yeah.
look at that. Okay, it would help if I looked at the questions. There it is. All right.
It would. And hey, just for those of you that are listening rather than watching, because we have two Ryans in the house today, and both of their last names start with the same letter, I will try, when I'm referring to Ryan Bibb, to designate Pastor Ryan or Ryan Bibb.
Superior Ryan.
Father Ryan.
Probably. Yeah. The Radiant Rabbi Ryan. Some way to designate, just so those of you that are listening know which Ryan we're talking to, if it isn't blatantly obvious, because one of them will be talking about working as a police officer, and the other one won't be. But, we try to cover all the bases. So to start with, Ryan and Dave, for our listeners, could you give a little bit of background on who each of you are, kind of, what you guys do, and that sort of thing? Ryan, we'll start with you.
I was going to go with age before beauty with Dave. But so I am currently the deputy police chief for the city of Sturgis. I've been there for 15 years. A little bit about my career. I've spent time on the road as a road patrol officer, as a supervisor, as a sergeant on the road. I spent time undercover working narcotics. Several years on the SWAT team, detective sergeant, and now currently deputy chief. So part of my day-to-day operations is kind of overseeing the daily show at the police department, dealing with officers, administrative matters, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Also in my time at the police department, Dave and I have been fortunate enough to do a couple mission trips down to Costa Rica, Ecuador, training some law enforcement officers. So been involved in that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, that's that at some point in the future we'll probably talk about Tactica, which is the organization you referenced on a future podcast when we talk about outreach. But yeah,
that was my shameless plug.
No, hey, that's all right.
We all have them.
That's all right. So how long have you been in Sturgis?
So I've been in Sturgis for 15 years.
Okay.
Yep. I came right out of the police academy, and Sturgis was my first job. Been here ever since.
Okay.
Dave is the one that hired me, so whether he regrets that choice,
maybe he'll tell us here today.
I started right here, right out of the police academy at 21 years old.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Yeah. All right, Dave.
I'm the retired public safety director, so I've been in law enforcement for over 25 years. Held jobs from the director of public safety, the chief of police, road supervisor, special response unit, drug unit. I did a little undercover work as well. Defensive tactics instructor, a DARE officer, and road patrol were some of the jobs I did for while in police work. Also, the Michigan Chiefs of Police. I was the chair for the Public Safety Committee, and Ryan as well was a graduate of the FBI's National Academy. That's an executive law enforcement academy, 3-month school. And I'm currently the safety and security director for the Sturgis schools. So that's kind of a quick summary of me.
All right.
What was your favorite of all that? What was the most exciting position you held?
The one I had most enjoyment out of was probably the school resource officer. The excitement, of course, is the raid team and the drug unit. So I had the long
adrenaline
hair, big
pumping.
Fat beard. Yeah, it's just it was interesting times.
Yeah.
So
I think most people that have worked on a drug team will kind of go back to that as being one of their most memorable points in their career. It's just a unique environment. It's a lot of fun.
Like memorable. Okay, fun.
Fun.
Unpack that a little bit. Like you're on a drug unit.
Because if I'm in danger, I don't equate danger and fun together.
Fun,
I
the
think,
fun.
yeah, but I think that's going to be one of the questions that comes up later as well, is that the personality type that you have as a police officer. I remember going into one of our drug houses, and I carried just a little pocket gun and walked in, and the guy's selling machine guns, and it was exciting times. So
Wait, was this was in Sturgis?
it was in St. Joseph County. So
Selling machine guns?
So you brought a pistol to a machine gun fight.
Yes, I did. That was one of those no bueno moments. So, yeah, it's just little things like that and things you get to do that you remember. And I remember, when we start to do after the drug buys, starting to do some of the pickups of all the people that we're arresting off the warrants, and I remember those like it was just yesterday.
Wow.
So
I think the fun is some of the satisfaction you get from the job. From your long hours you put into cases and the time you put into them to seeing the case all the way through to the end. The fun comes on multiple levels. The drug buys, that stuff, the raids, the entries on houses, that's fun. But the true fun for me always came from the satisfaction of seeing a case through to the end. So, and taking some people off the streets that need to be taken off the streets.
And kind of that satisfaction of, hey, I completed this.
Yeah.
And this was a good thing.
And I think that when you go, I think a lot of times when you talk about the fun times in your career, drug team, for officers that have worked the drug team, it always seems to be one of the big ones. But I think it's that team family atmosphere that you get working with people, 18 hours a day, multiple days in a row, away from your family, doing close work where you're trusting these people with your life. That develops a special bond that you won't find many places. So I think that's one of the reasons that you get that fondness of that specific job.
Yeah, and I think that it gives you also a little bit of meaning. There's a couple of cases that I remember, and they're not like big investigations, but it was just even a traffic crash with a guy getting out of a car as I'm pulling up, and he has some arterial bleeding, and it's just squirting pretty good. And that if you don't stop that very quickly, then this is a dad that's never going to go home and see his kids, and it's a husband that's not going to go home and see his wife. And so it's not like, oh, that was really fun. It was one of those things you know what your job is, you go take care of it, and you know that when you're done, you go shower and clean up, that he gets to go home. And so you just remember little parts of your cases over the years, and that one sticks out in my memory just as one of those.
Yeah. I think we all have those cases that you see it clear as day. 10, 15 years ago, it was like it was yesterday.
30 years ago for some of us.
Like I said, age before beauty.
But something that, you don't have to guess whether or not, hey, did I make a difference today? You made a difference because homeboy is going to be able to go home to his kids because you intervened.
Yes.
So there's,
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, before we jump in, I just want to thank you guys for coming on and doing this, because we're in a cultural moment of tension, right or wrong. It's there, whether we are on one side or another, or we're indifferent. It's there. So thanks for coming on to jump into this tension and walk this line with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Dave, I know you're super prepared. For those of you that are listening, I applaud that. I'm not knocking it.
Two styles.
You're super prepared. I did rearrange the questions. I didn't change them.
You just threw them for a loop.
But just based on kind of the conversation, I just want to jump in. What are some things that you think the general public, you guys are talking about some of the highlights of being on the force. Right? What are some things that you think the general public, ways that they take for granted, state, local, whether it's police, fire, any of the kind of the public.
It's question
safety.
number 7, Dave, just for your notes.
Already got that, yeah.
Now it's question number 2.
That's right.
But yeah, what are some ways that you think they take for granted what you guys do?
I'm not sure if it's take for granted would be the right way to put it. I think it's generally the safe environment that we live in here in the U.S. You compare us to a lot of other countries. The road safety, traffic crashes, that kind of stuff. The ability that when they call 911, no matter what time of day, night, someone's going to show up quickly to help them. I think people don't think about it until they have that moment where they need it. And so I think that's something that they've come to expect, come to depend on, but they don't necessarily think about it. So I think having that person, those people to call, those officers, firefighters, medics, whatever it may be, having someone to call and that will be there when they need them most. So I talked to the officers quite a few times about we see people at their absolute worst every day, hands down. We don't see them at their best. We see them when they're having a bad day, whether it's a child that's been injured, has passed away in their sleep. We see these people at their most vulnerable, and we show up no matter what. And so I think that's it may not take for granted, but they just have come to expect that and don't really think about having that option there until they need it.
I think for me, the nice part is that I was in the military as well, in the Marine Corps, and got to travel all over the world. So I've seen other countries and been in those environments. I've been in one country, just as we go there, there's a body floating down the river, normal thing. They're taking kids, putting them into prostitution. The kidnappings and murders and stuff that are happening elsewhere, and then you come back, and I sleep very comfortably here. I had somebody ask, well, is there any part of town you wouldn't walk through? No, I'm fine walking through any part of town. I would, walk with my wife. There are some areas, and I'm not stupid, there are some areas that I would probably be a little bit more observant than others. But, for the most part, we are in a very safe area. You don't have to go to bed wondering if somebody's going to drag you out of your house. You don't have to worry about if you're going to be alive or dead in the morning, or if your parents are going to be there, if you're going to be pulled into the sex trade or slavery trade. That's just not an everyday thing that we have to think about. And I think that part of our problem is that in the United States, we're not as well traveled as other people, and you don't really know, and we're apathetic, and because we don't really care. It's just when you look at that, you say, that's got nothing to do with me. I'm upset because my whatever game that you have now, I don't even know which ones they are, which PlayStation 85 or whatever they're on now. It's just you're upset because you had a last year's model, and that you don't see the stuff that goes there. And I think that what we take for granted is that you have people who are on the front line of dealing with stuff, whether you're a doctor, a nurse, a pastor, a police officer, that are dealing with that, and you get to be shielded from that. And I think that we take that for granted. And I don't want to just say it's only law enforcement, because it's not. How much junk are you guys dealing with now that pastors 10 years ago, 20 years ago didn't have to deal with, other than COVID, because I don't want to talk about that, is that, other stuff that's going on that you have to deal with that other people haven't had to deal with before you. And so I think that that's one of the things we need to really be thoughtful of, is what are others seeing? What are others doing? What are others going through? And I think that we need to have a tender heart toward that. And sometimes we do not.
No, that's good. That's good. I mean, so in a lot of ways, from what you guys are saying, it's kind of like really the way we would appreciate what we have more is if we didn't have it.
Yeah,
in a bad way, but we don't want to get to the point where we don't have it.
Right. I mean, it's become it's an expectation that we have this safe environment. We have the ability to walk the streets and not be overly concerned with what would happen. And there's a lot of places in this world that don't have that option. I mean, Dave and I spent time in Costa Rica, and a large portion of the officers that we trained were riot police. I mean, over half of their department, it seemed like, was riot police that just solely dealt with riots on a daily basis for a number of reasons. It wasn't safe to be downtown after certain hours, and it wasn't, there's all these kind of, you couldn't really go for a walk in certain neighborhoods. And so that was an expectation there, and here, we have systems in place that allow us to have for that freedom to do those things and not have to be concerned about that. So yeah, it's I think the expectation of safety.
Nice. So what is something, and we've hit a little bit on some of this, like what is something you think would surprise the average Joe citizen about law enforcement? About the things that you guys do on a day-to-day basis, just They're like, oh, whoa, I didn't realize that was part of the package.
And I'll let Ryan, he's got a better speech on this than I do, but the one thing that
Speech.
Yeah, and he has give him a topic, he has a speech, is,
Pull it on back pocket.
yeah, is one of the things that you don't think about. In here, for over 30 years, have been involved one way or another with law enforcement, is that I still remember a traffic crash that happened on South Centerville where a boy about the age of my son was riding a bike and it was sprinkling. He was trying to get home and a truck hit him. And then the guy was drunk, left the scene, left the kid to die on the road. And a second car with a family hits the guy and drags him 200 yards down the road further. And that's a call that you have to go to. And that each one of those things, it's like you have a little backpack and you just throw that in to your backpack. We had a child not breathing right across from my house, and I'm on the road and I get that call. So I'm responding. I'm thinking, that's my son's. Yeah. Well, I know that's my son's babysitter. Is that my son that I'm going to? That you see that in the Sid's death, you take all that stuff and you just keep throwing it in your pack, and that's something that you carry that other people don't know. Mm-hmm. And the bad part about it is that a lot of personality type law enforcement officers, I'm not going to talk to you about that. I'm not a sissy. I'm not going to cry about it. I'm not going to do anything. I have to compartmentalize it and go on. And that's the kind of stuff that people don't know. And I don't want you to feel sorry for them, because I don't care that you feel sorry for me. I didn't. Maybe you do. Ryan's a little more sensitive. So that's not what anybody's in for. Say, hey, I'm a hero. I hate it when people call you heroes. I'm doing my job. And that I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy doing my job. And that stuff that they take home, and it not only affects them, it affects their families. And it affects your social life. It affects what you can do and how you can do it. If I wanted to go out with some friends, I can't do that around here. You can't do it where you can relax. You have to go someplace else to go do that. And that's something that people really don't know. And that to me is the number one thing, is that when you pin that badge on, you pin it on to your family, not just to you.
Yeah, I would echo that same thing about how, not only the instance that you see, and I had conversations with people, well, it's Sturgis, what really goes on in Sturgis? The same things that go on anywhere else. You see more of them in a bigger city, but we deal with it here. And so you have, I know when Tenley, our youngest, was born, oldest, I'm gonna get in trouble now. When our oldest was born, I just came back to the road after being off for a couple weeks with her, and we had 3 infant deaths within a couple weeks. And I worked all of them. I was on call for every single one of them. So you go home at night and you see your little kid. And so I'm up 30 minutes checking her to see if she's breathing. And so you take some of that stuff, there's no way to pack it away and leave it at work. It comes home with you. Mm-hmm. But I think the biggest thing is, it's a family career. It's a family profession. I mean, my kids, they know if they have a friend, I need to know who the friend is. I need to know where they live. Just because, you're forced to have conversations with your young kids about things that most people probably don't. Why can't I go to that friend's house? Well,
it's the rest of them.
So how do you explain that to a 7-year-old? Why they can't go to their friend's house, or why someone can't come to your house, or why you're not, there on their birthday, or why you're not there on Christmas, when everyone else is celebrating Christmas because you're working. It's sacrifices not only on the officers or firefighter, their behalf, but it's sacrifices on a family level. And Dave kind of hit on it, of your inability to maybe go out to a restaurant, or you go to a restaurant and you see your waiter or waitress is somebody that you arrested recently, and we're going to have to leave because you just don't know. I would never want my profession to have a negative impact on my family, and so you have to end up taking precautions that most people don't think about. And so I think it's hardest when you have to deal with your kids and explain some of those things to them. I think you and I talked about, or JB and I, we were having a conversation recently about, like, my kids are super proud of Sturgis Police Department and their dad and everything else. So they like their Sturgis Police shirts. They like to wear them. And so I have to tell them, 8 weeks ago, you can't wear those shirts. You can't wear them when you go to the store. You can't wear them when you're out in public. You just can't do it. Why is that? And so my oldest one, she gets it. My 8-year-old, not so much. So, the safety concerns that come along with that and why it may not be safe to wear a shirt that supports law enforcement right now, kind of in the current culture and climate we have, are some difficult conversations. I'm sure Dave has had similar conversations with his kids and family when he was still on the road and still working in law enforcement. So
when you give them the look, they know it's time to go.
Yeah.
It's like, just go, no questions. And we've had to do that several times. What happened? And then you find out in the car. So this person just came in. We don't need to be here right now. And so
I actually put my oldest daughter underneath a clothes rack in a store one time because I had to deal with some people who were following me through the store. She was 4 or 5 at the time. I told her, stay right here for a second.
Dang. That'd be a different way to live. So, that leads into, because right now one of the conversations in our culture is a polarizing one. And so this is one aspect of it, right? But it's kind of putting, ethnic groups on this side and police over here. And there doesn't seem to be like a nice happy medium. But like, what is it like for you guys? Especially at Ryan right now, because you're actively on the force still. Mm-hmm. What is it like living in a climate that has really become so polarized to where it's like, no, you're either for this group or you're for this group. And in this case, one of the groups that people are for or against, it is the cultural narrative, is the police.
Right. It's difficult. It's difficult. I think Dave would probably agree with me on this. Law enforcement is a profession we both care deeply about. We're passionate about. I'm passionate about the officers that I get to work with, and the jobs they do. And I see how much they put into their job and how much it means to them and how much they invest in these cases and victims of crime, and the passion they have for that. So to see, and that's something that most people will never get to see or never get to understand because they don't see it on a daily basis. They're not involved in it on a daily basis. So to see a side of it that most people don't know, and see how much these officers care for their communities and all they invest in their communities, and then to see a negative narrative put out there, whether by media or whatnot, it's disheartening. It's saddening because I know that's not the accurate reflection of law enforcement and the officers that serve in law enforcement. At the end of the day, for me, you talk about the incident in question, the George Floyd incident. I think whether it's law enforcement, whether it's people in general, it comes down to a heart issue. It's a heart issue at the end of the day, no matter what. What was that person's heart? What was in their heart? What were they acting on at that moment? Police officers are still people, so the best way to look at it for me is it's a hard issue and it's an individual. We have to make sure our law enforcement has a heart for service and make sure they're acting in that role, but also have to understand some of the historical aspects of how these situations unfold, and maybe why they unfold, and know and make sure we have all the facts before we kind of go down that road.
Do you want to throw anything out there, Dave?
To me, it's the frustrating thing is focusing on the real thing. Is what's the real issue? If this issue is you have a Yahoo that's got some issues with excessive force, deal with that person. Just like if I'm telling you right now, kiting checks, writing bad checks, stealing, whatever, deal with that person. You don't paint with one big fat brush. And I think that's what we want to do as an American society is paint everything with a big old fat brush. And so I have one bad officer, your whole department's awful. If I have one guy who's black that committed crime, all black people commit crimes. I find him a guy who comes who looks brown, he's from Mexico. Oh, well, he had to have come here illegally. You know, it's just we paint with that stupid big fat brush instead of looking at each other individually. And that once we start looking at each other individually and dealing with the real issue, that's the only time that we can, I think, that's the only time that we can deal with the problems. And that we need to, this is one of those that he used really nice words. I used like anger.
So you're to the point and more blunt.
Yeah. I want to pick up my chair and throw it. Yeah. It's just that, you know, you leave a lifestyle. When I left the police department, I think that when I left, there's cheers here. It was fun. My retirement cake had on it, "You're dead to us." It's just, but you know, but when I left there, I think I left it in a better place than when I started. And that one of the things that we really worked on was family, and that we really worked on making a community and really pushing it that we care about the individual, moving it down to the individual. I think that any police department is a microcosm of the society around. So when you're saying, oh, there's racism in the police department, you know what? Yes, there is. Just like there is with pastors, doctors, nurses, truck drivers. Every place we have racism. Is it right? No. Do we need to deal with it? Yes. I think that a pastor is held to a higher standard, and the Bible says that you're held to a higher standard. A police officer is held to a higher standard. Hold them to that higher standard. If you have somebody who's doing something wrong, get rid of them. I have no problem with that. I fired plenty of police officers, paramedics, and allowed people to leave a profession that didn't really need them. And I think that we need to start manning up and start stepping up. And when we see somebody doing something wrong, deal with that wrong, not take that broad stroke and come across and say, you are all bad because of this. And I think that we will never have healing when we want to attack everybody and everything, and we do it in big groups. And not talking about big groups of rioters, not that, but when I'm just saying all black people, all white people, all pastors, all police officers, all construction workers, you know, all this other stuff, that we got to knock that stuff off. And if somebody is a cancer, you surgically remove that cancer. You don't throw out the entire body with it.
Right. So I mean, one of the big buzzwords or phrases in our culture right now is systemic racism. What I hear you saying is the problem is systemic generalization. Like, oh, this one cop did something bad, all cops are bad. This black guy did something bad, all black guys are bad. This Mexican guy did something, just generalization.
Yes.
I mean, is that? Yeah.
I mean, when you look at what is in the media and what's portrayed on the news, it's very rarely is it individual incidents. They talk about the incident when they apply it to the whole. And that's just furthering that divide. And at a time when we need to come together to look at, you know, issues as a country, we're getting further divided apart because this wedge is getting thrown in there, whether it is between law enforcement, whether it's between doctors, whatever it may be, right? I mean, the same thing kind of applies to, and I don't want to bring up COVID, Dave. So plug your ears.
Plug your ears, Dave.
You know, you talk about the divide that is causing in the country. You know, mask or no mask, right? It's these huge, and Dave hit it perfectly with, you know, the giant paintbrush that's applying to everybody. If you don't fall in line with one side or the other, it's unacceptable.
Right.
And so that same issue is what I think is affecting law enforcement, and it's affecting, you know, minority communities within the country as well.
All right. Well, hey, we're going to pause because we're actually this will be like the end of episode 23. And we're going to keep talking, and we'll finish this conversation maybe in episode 24, maybe in episode 25. We'll see where this goes. But yeah, thanks for hanging out with us for episode 23 of Radio Reflections. Join us for the next episode where we continue this conversation with Ryan Banaszak and Dave Northrop.